Hey friends, I also start like that, so I love it. Good morning. I am so happy to be here. I love Startup Week. Yesterday was amazing. So who all attended the sessions yesterday? Because I'm referencing some key ones that were talked about. If you didn't get a chance to watch them, then go back and see them again, because there were some really amazing things. I didn't have to talk about certain things today because it was covered yesterday. So I am coming to you from Columbia, Missouri, but I spent a good amount of time here in St. Louis. Love St. Louis. And so I'm going to actually grab my clicker. So let's talk about building strategy for growth. And I'm a little bit, actually before I launch into who I am, which has already been covered, I want to get a feel for who we have in the room, because I can talk about a couple different things here. I work with companies, hundreds of employees, working globally. I work with startup entrepreneurs where it's just them and one other person, a co-founder, that scrappy first team, love that. So I just want to get a feel for who you are, so this is as relevant as possible. So who is still idea stage? No company launched, just you, an idea, thinking about launching something. Awesome, okay. Who has launched and it's just you? One person, solo founder, awesome. Love the solo founders. You are carrying all the weight, all the world. Couple co-founders, 2 or 3. Very important relationship. We'll talk a lot about that early founding team, whether it looks like a co-founder or just a small early founding team. Anyone bigger than 10 employees? Okay, how big? 20, okay, perfect. All right, I just like to get a feel for what we're talking about here. So I want to talk a lot about early. The early stage, those first few years, first few employees, those are some really critical decisions. I lean heavy on the team strategy. That's what I get to do all day, every day. I get to work with my clients all around the world on who to hire when, those kind of timing. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about a lot. So as I said, I've had the opportunity to work all around the world with some amazing startups. This looks like anything and everything, all sorts of industries, mostly tech startups. But again, those can range from very early to hundreds of employees. You've scaled, you've grown. And in that time, I've had the experience to work with some incredible founders, incredible teams. They're doing it amazingly. And then you have a lot of lessons learned where it's not done quite as well, but you learn just as much from them. So I love this quote. So entrepreneurship is the audacity to challenge the status quo, it's the tenacity to persevere, and it's the creativity to innovate. These are some really powerful words. So audacity is one of my favorite words for entrepreneurship, because honestly, it does take some audacity for you to say, I can do this, and I can do it better than it's ever been done before. I can build this. I can do this myself. I can do this with my first scrappy team. So it does. It takes a little bit of audacity, a little bit of confidence, a lot of believing in yourself. The tenacity. We are going to talk a lot about tenacity, and it was hit on yesterday as well. You have to be gritty. It's hard. It is hard to build. It is hard to grow. I could call this presentation what you get when you want. If you get what you want, everything becomes complicated. So as you grow with success, you're going to encounter pain points every step of the way. It's the great thing about growth and success, and it's the hard thing about growth and success. And then the creativity to innovate. Every entrepreneur has to be creative. I used to fight this. I would put myself in firmly, I'm the technical ops person. I'm not a creative, but you have to be creative. And whether that's you're getting creative about solutions, you're getting creative about your product, how you approach it, every single entrepreneur has to be creative, has to be innovative, or it doesn't work. So anytime we talk about setting growth strategy, I like to ask myself every single day. So you're encountering a lot of micro decisions every single day. As a founder, as an early stage employee, there's all of these micro decisions you make that are going to shift the way you grow, the way your company succeeds. So ask yourself, is this an actual opportunity or is this a distraction? And that is the #1 question, because everything looks like an opportunity when you're early. Everything looks shiny, everything is exciting. Every time a client comes along and you want to work with them, but you make an exception for that client because they want it this way, but you built it that way, everything looks like opportunity. And it's the best thing about building, and it's the hardest thing, because focus is one of the hardest things to do. It's hard to narrow. I really loved the branding talk yesterday when it was all about niching down to grow. So it seems counterintuitive, and I thought Holly covered it really well, where focusing actually brings you more opportunity because you can serve your clients better. You can, again, you're narrowed in on what you're good at. So you're not trying to, we call it the spray and pray approach, right? You're not trying to serve all the people, do all the things. You're taking the true opportunities, and then you're ready for the true opportunities when you have them. So that you're not over here dealing with the 10 distractions you took on last week, and I can't take advantage of this really good opportunity that would serve me and my company. So just don't assume that everything is what it seems like. It's a question to ask every day. So most of what I'm talking about today is more methodology, because each one of you is very unique and different. I just learned about an amazing knitting company this morning that's here. So again, there's, you can be a tech startup, you can be a creative craft startup, you can do all of these different angles. And the decisions you have to make, there are some consistencies to how you can decide what's a good opportunity, how you build that strategy, and how you grow. So ask yourself a lot of questions. We had the opportunity distraction question. Let's also talk about whether it's sustainable or scalable. Startups like to use the word scalable a lot. Scalable, all that means is that you can actually hit that demand when you get it without decreasing your quality. That can mean a lot of different things on a lot of different levels. So when you're talking tech, it's important to have a scalable tech platform. It's important that when you have 5 early adopter customers, then when you have hundreds and then ultimately thousands, because you're wildly successful, your platform can handle it. The same concept applies when you're talking about employees, when you're talking about your team, when you're talking about capacity. And so make sure that it's scalable. That foundation you're building is strong so that when you build the skyscraper on top of it, it's not all crumbly. So, and then sustainable, so I always ask myself, what can I actually maintain? So as a solo or a co-founder or a small scrappy team, again, you're gonna wanna take on the world. You want to do all the things, but what can we actually maintain and serve our customers, deliver our product well, and this is all long-term. So you're gonna get all the short-term growth opportunities, but then what can be long-term sustainable? And then this really keeps an eye on all the other outside factors. So it's not just what's happening inside, it's what is the market doing? What are our customers telling us that they want? What do we want to grow into? And again, not planning for the one-offs. So in the same way you're talking about opportunity distraction, don't build your company around one-offs. We run into this all the time. People want a different package, a different approach, a different timeline, and each one, that's not a sustainable practice to have this customized, just all over the board, this for this person, this for this person. And so if you're truly trying to build something you can resell and is highly scalable and sustainable, you're gonna want to create some standardized practices as much as possible. So again, you're gonna see a lot of balance from me. So I always like to boil this down as simple as possible. There's a lot of nuances to startups, to companies, so we could have a list of 5 things to consider up here. I like to boil things down to 2. So you've got the sustainable, scalable, you have systems and teams. So at the end of the day, your business boils down to what am I building on my systems? If you're tech enabled, that's gonna look like a tech stack. Operations, what's behind the scenes? What are those systems? And then what does my team look like? So again, you're growing from you to an early founding team to a broader team. What does that team look like, and scaling that? So you're scaling these 2 things in balance. One of the considerations I always love, so I'm a big tech person, I love it, I'm all about it. We chatted about ChatGPT already this morning. This is brought to you by Canva. I'm all about using tech to save you time. And a good tech decisions can save you headcount. And that's really where another one of these considerations, that balance comes in, where if you have good systems, you have good decisions on tech, you might not have to hire as quickly, or you might not have to hire full time, or you can get a lot done as a solo person. And so making these decisions in that balance but sometimes things need to be done by a person. So again, making sure the systems can support them as well. So it's all about having both of those at the same time. I'm gonna pause for a second. I will say, if you have questions, just raise your hand and say it, or if you've experienced this done really well, or really painfully, I also want to hear that too. I don't like to just stand up here and hear myself talk for an hour, so please do ask questions throughout. So anything at this point yet? Okay, I'm going to shift gears here. Okay, Crystal, yeah.
How do you decide when and how to use technology with the ongoing conversations around technology?
It's the big question, yes. Very good question. So Crystal asked, how do you decide when to use technology? So again, everybody has AI. Like everybody's talking about generative AI right now. There's a way to leverage that where it makes sense, and then sometimes that could be that distraction that takes you away from your core mission. And if it doesn't make sense to make a new plugin for your platform to just be buzzwordy or be trendy, that may be a distraction. So it's a good question. On a high level, I would just say, is leveraging the tech letting you do what your core business does well better? So taking what your core is, staying in that focus lane, and it just enhances what you're doing. That's a good time to, yes, jump on a new tool, explore a new solution. When it's just something that came to you, you didn't seek it out, you read a TechCrunch article about how generative AI is changing the world of real estate, now I'm a realtor, now I need to use AI, that may be a distraction. And so leverage it when it makes the most sense and it came from within your business, from within your own strategy. And it all goes back to that North Star. So I know what I want to build. I know an idea of where I want to go. How I get there is a curving path. They always say, like, be firm on that final point, but a little flexible about the process on how you get there. So tech is your best friend, or it can be a distraction. So the amount of tech tools a team can use, if you let everyone on your team decide what they want to use and it's scattered all over the place, that can very much be a distraction. One of my roles was in change management and corporate IT, and I spent almost an entire year retiring alternative tech platforms from the core company, because the core company has a mission, they want to deliver it, they want everyone on the same communication tools, and then all of these other departments each had their own favorite, they each had their own platform, they each had their own thing, and you want a unified focus. So that's where I think tech can be distracting, is when you can kind of try all the things, never decide on one. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay, yes. Awesome. And thank you for questions. Keep them coming. So I had a lot of solo founders raise their hands. This is a hard place to be. Solo founding, it's an opportunity and it's a challenge, like everything. So you have the freedom to create your vision without having to compromise with a co-founder or a team of co-founders. That is amazing. You can have a brilliant time doing that, and it is hard. It can be very solitary, it can be very challenging. It is hard to build alone. And so my biggest piece of advice is you don't have to build alone. Just because you're a co-founder does not mean you don't have a support system. In fact, it definitely should not. You need it more than anyone. I have a co-founder relationship, which is brilliant. I love having two of us to bounce things off of. We still need a support network. So it does not matter how big your company is. The same reason we're all here in this room today, why we're all here this week, we need community. We need support. We want to build side by side with people. You do it better. That's how you get ideas. That's how you grow. And so there's a couple types of relationships when I'm working with, especially really early, whether you're solo, early founding team, there's a few different types of relationships I would advise you to find. So think about, these are your support personas here. So I like to give the advice that find somebody who's just a year or two ahead of you in something pretty similar. And the reason I say this is because they're going to remember those pain points better than somebody who is 5 to 10 years ahead. They're not going to remember what year one truly felt like. Everyone glosses over. This is why you have serial founders, right, who keep coming back and doing it again. That first 2 years of startup life is so hard. But you kind of forget once you hit the highs. So if you can find somebody who's still kind of deep in the trenches, but they figured something out. So they figured it out, they came out successfully, and they're just ahead of you and they're doing it well. That's a really good person to have as a good kind of team member, mentor, not team member, but mentor and advisor. Somebody you can go to and just ask, like, what was it like when you first put together your seed round term sheet? Like, what was it like when you hired your first salesperson, and what did you learn? So this person is close enough, but they've made it out. They made it out of the dip and they're on the uphill. Definitely find people more seasoned than that. So you're gonna find lots of mentors, lots of advisors, people who have been there, done that tons of times, at least one really good time, but ideally multiple times. These are your board of advisors, these are your mentors, these are the people you go to when you have the really nitty-gritty questions, and you wanna know, you can't just make it 2 years, you can make it out the other side to the 10-year, 20-year, 30-year mark. So definitely surround yourself with those types. And then also just like-minded peers. Again, this room right here is a great place to collect a community of support of other builders, because this is a lonely thing. It is hard to build. It is hard to make decisions and then second guess those decisions and then hope that everything is gonna turn out okay in a year, but you don't really know. It's nice to just have somebody to commiserate with, honestly. So whether that's on your team, ideally you could get some trusted but you also have to be strong for your team. So ideally you'll have another founder outside your business that you can be real with. So that's the type of support network I typically, and then you also want all your champions. So even if you're not being raw and vulnerable with everyone in your network, definitely have the other people who are gonna cheer you on as you win, celebrate your successes, amplify all those great pivot points that you're navigating, and just have more fun throughout the process. So I'm glad everybody's here, because I can't say enough good things about just building community, especially entrepreneurial community. So the question on founding teams, there's a lot of roles you have to cover in any business. And when you're talking about a founding team, if you're one person, if you have a co-founder relationship, I think it's funny, nobody can agree on what the ideal founding team looks like. The average is 1.72, so there's a lot of solo founders who are wildly successful. You see all of those on TechCrunch, you see the IPOs, you see the unicorns. There's a lot of solo founders who end up being wildly successful, but they hired good teams early on. So again, they did not build alone, but they hold the single founder title. There's a lot of co-founder relationships. The co-founder relationship is really special because you do get to spread things out a little bit. There's a lot of roles to cover. You get to be sales, operations, marketing, customer success. You get to be some legal advice every once in a while. You get to do all the things when you're a founder. And so if you can split that up even to just 2 people, it's a really great place to be. But again, it doesn't have to look like a founding relationship. That's why I call this founding teams. So it could be an early hire. This could look like your first COO, chief of staff, just your right-hand person. The titles don't matter. Startups' titles are arbitrary. But you have the person who started the company, and then you have the additional support network, however that needs to look. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the personas you definitely need to make sure you cover, whether that is you as a person putting on different hats, because you have to be all the things when you first start. If it's you and a co-founder and you make sure all of these hats are covered, or if you hire this as soon as possible, so you know where the gaps are. You know what you are, and then you know who the gaps, who to hire first. So a couple personas here. We all know the visionary. We love the visionary. They're the fun one, right? They're the heart of the company. They are the ones who get to be big picture. This is typically your first founder. They are typically your CEO. This is the externally facing face of your company, and we call it the heart, really. They have to be eternal optimists in this role. You have to just see blue sky and shoot for the moon and just be able to be an optimist about building in this role. It's harder than you think. This is a hard one to be, because to your team, you have to project, we can do this, guys. We got this. We're great. Crystal's up here laughing because I know what it's like. Like, it is so hard to be this person. It looks fun. It's not always fun. And I'll talk a little bit about how some of these roles can morph and change over time, This is really a fun one. What's most important about this, and I have it there at the bottom, working on the business, not just in the business. And we say this a lot in entrepreneurship, right? You don't want to get down in the weeds, working in your business, head down, and never look up. You have to work on your business. So when we're talking about building strategy for growth, you have that eye on the big picture. You have that eye on your vision. You have that eye on where you're going, so you can bring everybody else with you, your clients and your team. So it's harder than it looks to be this person. The next one I'm going to say is this duo relationship. And we were talking, I love the COO role. It is such an underappreciated role in an organization. So I'm gonna raise them up a lot. I call them the hustler, because this is the person, some people call it the integrator. If anyone's read Traction, you've got the visionary integrator relationship. Same kind of thing. This is the hustler. This is the person who sees the vision, they believe in it, they're bought in, they contribute to it, but they are focused on the execution. So they're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. How are we gonna do it? That's this person. So critical. This is the right-hand person to the CEO visionary. They do all the things that they don't do. And so that jack of all trades have to be a little bit of a generalist, very scrappy, have to be very grounded. So again, it's that bringing back to earth. So the visionary is just always looking out. They're always up on the peak, looking at all the things. We love the visionary. The hustler brings them back down to earth. So I'll just talk a little bit about this. So I've served both these roles. So again, this isn't you plug into one spot. So when I was with an early stage health tech company, I was the COO. And actually most of my career, I've stuck firmly in the ops bucket. I'm a naturally organized person. I like to bring order to chaos, so it's a good place for me to sit. So I was the COO. They literally called me the dark storm cloud because, and I mean, I like to think I'm a very pleasant person, but I had to be the no person. I had to say, yes, visionary, I love what you're thinking. I had to sit in a room with creatives and say, oh yeah, those are all great ideas. And it was a very creative organization. So there's 50 million ideas out of every strategy session that we had. We whiteboarded all the things, and I had to be the person who's like, how's it gonna get done? Who's gonna pay for it? Who's gonna, how are we gonna pay for it? Who is gonna pay us to do it? And how on earth is anyone gonna get that done when we're already all working at 120% capacity? I had to be the dark storm cloud. I do not call the hustler the dark storm cloud because I did not like that, but that is such a critical, the grounding. So I call this the person who's grounded. It's, yes, you can fly high, you have to, and you have to be able to actually execute on it. So this duality is really important. And I'll go back to, yeah.
So I have a question for you. So as you think about hiring, when you talk about the hustler, what does that look like on a job qualifications form? You know what I mean?
It's such a good question. Yeah. Yes, I don't mean to laugh, but it's such a good question. Like, so what does this look like when you're looking for this person, when you've posted a job or you're trying to describe what this looks like? Often, if we have to put a title on it, this looks like a COO or a chief of staff. So those are the most common. You know, it can look like a few different variations on that. You don't have to give away a C-suite title. You can be a VP of ops or a, operations manager. But that's the most typical, especially super early. And when you're describing that person, I always say first, and we're gonna get in a little bit to like how to hire, but just on a high level, when you're mapping out roles and responsibilities in there, make sure you know where your bucket is. So it's important to map yourself out. So where am I at? Lean into my strengths. What am I good at? Where are my gaps? Where are my weaknesses that I'm gonna need to offset? And then who's this other person? And just write it as a persona, like who does this need to be? Because I'm this, and this balance is so important. I talk a lot about balance, but it's so critical that this does not look like you. You need somebody who does what you don't do, who thinks how you don't think, and who, again, this particular role has to think about all the things that could go wrong, all of the variations on how it could be done, and then actually pick a lane. So the visionaries often think about all the ways it could be done, but they get to be the big dreamer. Again, you have to make hard decisions in that role, but they get to be the let's explore person. When you're mapping out the COO, and so often when I write like a role description, if you're shopping for this, you're posting a role, I don't use Indeed, but like Angel List, Well Found, somewhere like that where you're looking for a startup, early stage startup person, you are trying to describe a very organized, a very grounded, a very execution-focused person. So I like to tell a story when I post a job if I can. I tell about the company and the vision, but I also describe this person is somebody who is going to take all the crazy ideas and make an executable strategy out of it. So and we can get more into that. But they see the vision. They do. So this, if you're the only one, and you're like, okay, how do I do all the things? Just know you have these hats to put on. Yeah.
Can you share, because I know it's out there, but it doesn't always get like everyone thinks the founder is the visionary, and sometimes, especially if you're talking like an engineer that is starting, stereotyping, but you can hire for vision too.
Yes.
And so it's not, so I'm sure you see that, like how
Yeah.
if you were doing the opposite of what Kristen just asked, like if you were like,
100%, yeah.
so the weeds on this, I need that. But
Yeah.
how do you go for that while you're still staying true to like what you have,
Yes, and I want to answer that question. I'm going to finish the 1/3 persona because this might answer your question because this is your technical person. And then I want to come back to that. So the question was, how do you hire for the vision half if you're the implementer, you're the execution-driven technical person? But there's this third persona as well. So we often talk about co-founders, but you have really a third seat here. This is everything product. They live and breathe your products. So in a technical oriented company, this is your most technical person typically. They live and breathe the product design, the solution. If you're like a research base, so I work with a lot of scientists who launch companies, right? Researchers. So it doesn't have to be a tech platform to have this. We call it the hacker, but again, it could be somebody who just knows inside and out your industry, the solution, the building. They are the problem solver, and they're nitty gritty, and they have to live and breathe product all day long. So whether that product is knitting, whether that product is research, whether that product is a tech solution, it can be anything, but they are that mindset, that really technical nitty gritty person. So to answer your amazing question, again, if I'm a person, one person, trying to build this, I have to know that these are the different buckets I have to think like. If I have the benefit of being able to either have a co-founder or hire early, I need to know what I'm not and hire for that. So to your point, the founder does not have to be the visionary. The CEO typically does. If you're giving away that title, the CEO should be. It's the externally focused person. But the founder does not have to be. Oftentimes, my favorite startups are formed because I experienced this crazy pain point. I want to solve it. Nobody else has solved it, at least in a way that I think it should be solved. So then I'm going to build it. That's where you're at. So that doesn't have to be this visionary person, although you do have to be pretty innovative and visionary to even have that thought and have the initial founding gumption to do this. But I need to know where I don't fit. So I was talking a little bit about these personas. So I sat firmly in the COO bucket for that health tech startup because that's what needed to be there. It was something I could do, I had the aptitude to do, and that's what the company needed, so that's what I served. I'm a pretty optimistic person, so living in the storm cloud bucket was not maybe my favorite thing, but it was what the company needed at the time. I get to sit more in a CEO type visionary role in our current company. One, that's a little bit more my natural inclination. I like to be all blue sky and shoot for all the ideas and all the things. And then I have an amazing co-founder who is our execution-focused person, who is our how do we get it done. So this can morph and change over time. So we were talking earlier, like Heather, about you get to sit in the ops bucket often. When I need to step into the CEO seat, I can. So as a founder, you just know these different personas are there. Every company should have components of all of these, whether you're 1, 2, 3, 20. And you just need to know where your gaps are and fill those gaps as quickly as you possibly can, considering all the rest. So we're going to talk a lot about kind of how you do that, because that's easier said than done. So any other questions at this point? I always love to hear cool success stories as well. Yeah.
I'm going to share, I think I'm going to share a success and a failure.
Yeah.
So, my name is Crystal. I'm a founder of a beauty tech startup. And I guess I'm a second-time founder. So I bootstrapped the company, sold it. What I'm struggling with is like you bring someone on, they're in a position. So I brought on this someone in a position, and I thought it was great. And then as you work with them, you realize that like what you thought they could do, they can't do. How do you go about like changing that? And
You asked the tricky questions, Crystal.
and, you know,
No, it's good. This is so relevant because, and I just forgot to transition to that one while we were chatting. But yes, mishiring early, or not even a full mishire, right? So we talk a lot about kind of who needs to fill these seats, and you don't always know. So the first people to come to you to join your vision aren't always the best people to come and join your vision, but it's hard to know. It's also hard to evaluate because you have your least amount of resources at this stage. You can't pay market rate for a COO. So sometimes you take what you can get in the early stage as far as passion-driven people. So you can get somebody who's really passionate, they buy into what you're building, they're willing to come in this scrappy, chaotic early stage for a lot less money. That's a gem of a person. And sometimes they sit in the wrong seat. Or the role evolves past them. So all of these different things, so when I think about how you're growing and how your company expands over time, and the reason I asked you all how big your companies were at this point is because talking about a company under 20 employees, talking about a one-person company is a million times different than even a 20-person company in what kind of pain points you're going to evaluate. So this is a long way of answering your question, but your early stage people may or may not grow with you as well as you grow with your company. And that is hard decisions to make as you expand. Doesn't mean they have to leave, but it does mean that their role might have to evolve. It might need to shrink. They might need shifted. So it's all about those seats on the bus, right? So you can get the right people on the bus, but you don't know where they sit. And maybe they sit up here for a while and then they've got to shift back here because that's the way the company's evolved and expanded. Because that first few years of building, either before you have a product, and then when you're going to market, and then when you finally have some great clients, and then when your clients expand to a point where there's a lot of pain into maintaining customer support, all of those phases have such different pain points. It is very difficult to have the exact same people in the exact same seats without evolving. So the couple things, and actually I'm going to jump slightly ahead. No, way too ahead, way too far. My clicker doesn't like going backwards, it just likes going forwards. So, I know, right? This is relevant. So don't hire till it hurts. Wade is local Columbia, so Zapier was founded out of Columbia. I'm a big fan of what they've built. They bootstrapped it. They are huge. They are essential. I think most of us have used some semblance of a Zapier integration. So this adds on to what you're asking, but again, postponing the hire as long as you can, running as lean as you can, reduces some of these pain points. And I am going to get back to what you asked, but if you don't hire till it hurts, it means you know where the true pain points are versus what you just wanted to get off your plate. Because it is very easy to hire somebody to do the things you don't want to do. But I would always say running as lean as you can for as long as you can is the ideal. Because as soon as you start adding overhead and management responsibilities, your world gets more complicated. So the weight you thought you were lifting by transferring that workload might not be as heavy as you think, because management and making these decisions can be just as painful, if not more so. Especially when these are dear friends that you're hiring. Early stage, you become friends, even if you didn't start that way. You're building together. There's a reason they always say you spend it's like a family, and I know everybody rolls their eyes at that now, but when you are in that first early stage, these people are your people. You spend more time with them than your spouse. You spend more time with them than anyone else, unless it is your spouse in my situation, but you really have to start to enjoy and like each other at that phase. So then it becomes really hard when you have to make hard decisions about where they need to sit, especially if they disagree with you. So to come back around, so maybe somebody is in a role, either they're filling one of the 3 roles that we talked about, or they were just an early hire that maybe doesn't fit. So 6 months in, a year in, you're like, oh, they're not performing. They're really not doing what I need them to do, or they haven't evolved with the company. My best advice is transparency. So I always err on the side of transparency with your team as much as you can without terrifying them. So there is a balance, right? So as a founder, you got to hold some things close to the vest. There's some hard things that you may or may not need to tell your team all the nitty-gritty details about how we're going to get everything done. But your team needs to know how they're doing. They need to know how they're meeting expectations. They need to know where you see that vision and how they fit within that vision and where their kind of lane is. So whether that fits firmly in one of those big buckets we talked about or a variation within those swim lanes, they need to know where they're pointed and that you're all pointed in the same direction. So I like to think, and this is me being the optimist, I like to think that people know when they're not performing. They may not admit it, but they do typically know. And they typically know if I'm dropping a little bit shy of expectations, especially if they're, you work hard with your team, you talk to them about where you're pointed. So if you get to the point where you're seeing this mismatch of they're sitting in the COO bucket and really they're not executing the way I think that they should, or they're not boiling things down into the nitty-gritty details and getting that strategy done, there's some key things that I'm sensing are missing. That full transparency with them is I think the only way to go, especially if they're one of your first early stage key people. Because if you're not transparent, then they're gonna have no idea. You never wanna blindside somebody. And there's never that opportunity to improve and evolve. And they're not gonna be blindsided if you end up having that conversation, which is, you are amazing, you're great, you're passionate, I really want to shift you over here, or this isn't the right fit for you. And then that's not a surprise. I never want an exit conversation to be a surprise to an employee. So it's a hard conversation to have, but it's those hard decisions you have to make. But it's not always kicking them off the bus, right? It could just be shifting. That's why I don't love, so if it's not a true co-founder, I don't love giving away C-suite titles very early, because that C-suite feels like a long-term partner. I'm in it forever, and we're going to exit this company together. That's what that feels like to me. I don't like giving that away too early because that's a partner. That's somebody who's in it. So VP of Ops for that, operations manager, whatever you want to call it. I think that's, again, chief of staff doesn't quite fit in the same bucket, but giving away those titles gives a sense of permanency to it that you may or may not want to give away before you truly understand what that person's made of. So, very good questions, yeah.
I have a question about the don't hire until it hurts. So I am in marketing, and I could probably do whatever anybody needs when it comes to marketing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a solopreneur. With my company, I know that there are people that can design better than me. There are people that have more passion with social media than I do and are probably better at that. So is there any benefit to hiring someone, maybe even as a 1099 employee, to just, hey, you're better at this, can you do this project for me so that I'm...
Yes, Kevin. It's like I paid you for my transition, so I love it. Yes, obviously you have to hire, and yes, you should hire strategically. So it's that timing, right hire, right time, right? So it could be the right person, kind of what we've been talking about with Crystal's question. It could be the right person, but not the right time. So sometimes we hire too early. Yesterday's sales hire conversation was exceptional. So I won't repeat what Christy talked about, but go back and watch it because it was amazing. Sales hires, we see a lot of mishires because people hire too early or they hire the wrong person or too late, right? But typically it's too early is more common. So the timing is everything and the right person is everything, but you can get creative about who and how. So I'll answer your question about contractors in 2 slides, but first, make sure you have that needs versus wants conversation with yourself. You have to be really honest with yourself on, is this something I can do? I'm sustaining fine. It's scalable with me for now. I just don't like it. Sometimes you gotta keep through the pain and just keep that on, versus what do I actually need? And what's the biggest need for my company, not just what I want. Because if you are, say, a non-technical founder who's building a technical product, you need technical advice. You need a solid person who knows how to build what you're trying to build. So that's a need. But how you get there can look like a lot of different ways. That could be a consultant, that could be an advisor who just oversees some of the decisions you're making. That can be a contractor. I love contractors. Like, I love to leverage part-time, as little as possible. Fractional executives are a great way to go if you need higher level strategic thinking but not a full-time person. So yes, who that is can look a lot of different ways. I always prioritize revenue generating roles, because let's be real, we have to have the money to keep building the thing. So if your first couple hires can be somebody who actually moves the needle for you to bring in more clients, more money, that should always be the priority if possible. There's the things that have to get done in the company, but again, if I can keep doing it, I just don't like to do it, but I can keep doing it, I can keep putting in the hours, ideally you're prioritizing those revenue generating roles. I sometimes also say capacity generating roles, and the way I say that is because if you're a good salesperson as a founder, and you should be, founder-led sales are how most companies should start. You're your first salesperson, always. If you can keep selling, then maybe it's a capacity generating role that lets you keep selling. So I would put that in the same bucket as revenue generating roles. I don't like to hire sales too early, so don't take this as just salespeople. But it's who moves the needle. So can I serve more clients by hiring that contractor so I can keep selling? Great, that saves me enough time and the value add is there. So those are the questions you ask yourself, like, does it free me up to bring in the money? Does it free me up to bring in investment or sales? So always consider budget and equity and that balance. So not everybody's working with equity, but ownership stakes can still come into play even if you're not going after VC backing. Obviously, budget, cash is king. Keeping enough cash on hand so that you have the runway to keep paying the people that you're bringing onto your team. This is why I say don't hire till it hurts, because you don't want to hire somebody and have to let them go because you ran out of cash too quickly. That's a hard place to be. So balancing how you utilize your equity is a good play, very, very common in early stage startups, especially if you're going after investment, venture backing. I balance this a little bit. Sometimes you should just pay a competitive market rate to get a quality employee, and maybe you're not giving away some ownership stakes. So it's not always leaning on equity and paying people a lot less. That's one of those sustainable questions and scalable questions you need to start asking yourself. Is it sustainable for me to give away this big of a chunk of equity to pay them less? Are they going to stay? Are they actually going to be a contributor long term? Are they actually earning this ownership stake in my company that ideally is worth a lot more money by the time it's executed? So again, it's a balance. I don't have the perfect answer for every one of your companies, but just the things to consider. Leverage alternative support. I'm the biggest proponent of contract help, part-time help, fractional help. I'm that. So the role I serve for my clients is I do the talent and hiring strategy and recruiting. So they take this piece of the company and hand it over to me. I should cost less than them keeping that headcount in-house 100% of the time, right? That's the whole goal, right? So that's the service we're providing to our clients. That's the same thing you leverage internally. So if I don't need to keep this person on full time, but I have them in the ebbs and flows, I have them for the intense client work, this is making me better. This is making me bring in more money because I can leverage this role. Absolutely. So there are certain companies that run completely on contractors and never bring in a full-time employee. That is a perfectly viable and valid way to grow. if that makes sense for your business model. So just leveraging alternative support. So it can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes they're just really eager people who are willing to do an internship for you, and that's great. So you can look into different creative ways to do that. Has anyone had like a really creative kind of additional staff member support? We get a lot out of the University of Missouri. I'll get a great intern who can do social media. It's amazing, so.
I would say I got, so I went Missouri Startup Weekend, and one of my people that I met randomly from Missouri Startup Weekend came on as an intern in marketing from her, from that, and then my very first VA is now my online business manager, and she's been with me since 2019. So
that's
knowing
beautiful.
where she started, where she wanted to go, and then having her grow with me.
Yeah,
So.
and that's the perfect kind of, again, these segues are working out perfectly. I promise I didn't plan any of these. But planning for growth. So these people that you're hiring early, keep an eye on where they're going. So your first VA turning into your online business manager isn't probably something you ever thought could happen in that first year. They're just a really good person, a really adaptable, scrappy person who is a great team player. So they evolve and grow over time. So when you're having these early conversations and you're scoping out your team, always keep an eye on what's the next step. And you don't have to know all the answers. But the questions I always like to ask is, I keep going back to sales. I'll use engineering for a second. So sometimes your first developer is not going to be your VP of engineering or CTO later. Individual contributors don't always turn into managers. And in fact, often they